to think of your identity in the following terms, made up of various different components, and to think what these components mean for you. A sense of your core, your real sense of who you are. What is your sense of who you are? If you think about that, if you imagine your sense of who you are, what does that mean to you? What does that feel like if you give yourself the time to sense that? And if you were to think in terms of symbols, what would be a symbol for your sense of who you are? Some people may see themselves at their core level as a volcano of light, for example. What do you sense when you think of your core? Then you come along and you think of your potential. What is your potential? Your potential of what you could become, what you could be. What could that be for you? And what would be a symbol for that for you, of what you could become? And in a moment, take time to think of that. And your limitation. A sense of limitation. Similarly, the same thing. What do you feel you are, or feel you are not, rather? What do you feel you are not, but that you'd like to be, that you want to be? What would be a symbol for that, for you? And boundary. Your boundary. Something you're not, or will not be, or you're not any longer, you don't want to be. What would be a symbol for that for you? What is your boundary? It may have been that. You're not that any longer. You won't be. What is that? And then a sense of your weakness, your defect, if you like. Weakness or defect. What would that be for you? Well, something you're afraid that you could become. What would be a symbol for that for you? And then finally, your shadow. Your shadow. Your shadow. A symbol for what you believe you will always be, but you don't want to be. Your shadow. What is a symbol for that?
It's like those two theater masks. Like the one you really want to present yourself. It's like your core. This is who I would like to show. And then there's the second theater mask that you kind of hide and you don't want to have people see. But the secret is your secret. Your friends know anyways.
Yeah.
You see, there are people that probably know about your shadows.
So take a moment to just think about those for a second. And think in terms of symbol. What would be a symbol for your core, your potential?
Or like an image or
Yeah.
visually a symbol of a circle.
Yeah, for example, your boundary could be a lock gate, a symbol, something that represents that As in,
plus circle.
no, not a disc, for example. Anything that represents symbol, kind of metaphor, really. You know, it's a symbolic representation.
It can also be like a metaphor. So if you would answer, if you would fill in the blank of I am like, and then like, and fill in the blank, what image, what symbol, what metaphor comes up for you. If I'm in my sense of core, I am like, and then whatever metaphor is there.
Yeah. Or potential. I'm like an athlete in the starting position. Yeah. So think of those things. Think in terms of those things. And what we're going to do is we're going to literally walk through our identity using the idea of symbols, of representations, of physical representations for these parts or areas of our sense of our identity. Yeah. Has everybody thought of something for each of those, to something that represents, symbols that represent those? So what we'd like to do is demo this. So what we'd like is 7 volunteers in fact. 7 volunteers. That's half the group. Alex, thank you very much.
And we cut you in pieces to lay out this form.
So Alex, thank you very much. David, yeah, if you'd like to come forward, 6 volunteers. Thank you very much. Great. Alex, if you'd like to come stand here for me, just for a moment. And if I could ask David if you could take a position here, and then the next person here, the next person here, and then we can mirror that with the other 3 people facing those. So you're facing each other, somebody facing Julia, and then, so I need another person, one more person. Thank you very much, Andrew. Okay, so if we could give it some nice space, nice equal proportioning. And so Alex, if it's okay, we're going to walk through your identity, so to speak. So we're going to guide you through this identity, and we're angels guiding you through, an angel guiding you through. So what I'd like you to do, Alex, is first of all, in a moment, just take a step into your core. And what I mean by that is this position here beside your core, and David, you're representing the core in this instance. And just 1 second. And once you do that, I'd like you to connect with your sense of what your core is, what it really means to you, your sense of who that is or what that is, a part of you. And I'd like you to think of a personification. And this can be, rather than, as we did earlier, a fixed position, it could be a fluid movement that perhaps ends in what that fixed position is. So there is a build to that, if that makes sense, yeah? And then into the fixed position of how that ends. So there is a movement to it, yeah? Is that okay? Does that make sense?
So there must be a movement.
It must be. I mean, if
whatever it connects to me.
absolutely. I mean, if you feel that actually it's not a movement, it is something fixed, then it can be that. Yeah.
And and maybe it's the sense of this is who I am, always was, always will be. Is that true connection of this is my core and that's always been with me? And what kind of stance does bubble up for you?
Okay.
it's that sense, this is who I am, I want to be,
This is who I am.
and that true sense of self.
Okay. And that's representation for you of your core. Okay. And then when you've really connected to that and you're happy with that as a representation, you sense what that is. When you're ready, you can then release yourself from that, and when you're ready, take a step forward. And David, what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to inhabit the space that Alex leaves and inhabit the movement into that position, and then hold that position. Okay? Okay, Alex, when you're ready, take your step forward into your potential. And David, if you'd like to inhabit that, for that, thank you.
So this is the space I am, in a sense of this is who I could become, and I really want to become. This is my potential. This is the space I can grow into. Possibilities. And just allow your body to teach you what stance, what movement allows you to really sense me, who I can become.
Okay. Again, your potential, you're happy with the feeling of that, the sense of that, the representation of that. Very good, full representation of your potential. And again, similarly, in a moment I'm going to ask you to step forward again, and when I do, if you could inhabit that space and the movement into that position and hold that would be great. Okay, Alex, when you're ready. Thank you. Stepping into your limitation, and your sense of that limitation. And once again, you need to watch. And the movement into the position, if that's appropriate.
It's that space where you feel I would like to be, but I don't feel it's possible for me. Sense of limit. I want, but it's not possible for me.
To feel and sense that completely. And then, when you're ready, when you feel you've encapsulated that, if you'd like then to come across, and Judy, again, if you could step in, coming across now into your boundary. Perhaps something that you were, that you don't want to be. It's a boundary for you. What is that? It's a sense of your boundary.
You really get a good sense of I really don't want to be, and I am not. I know I'm not. So it's that really interesting space where you're really aware of, clearly know, boundary. This is not me. I don't want to be. it's a yes to no.
Okay. When you're happy with that, Alex. Okay, slowly. Kim,
Take your time.
and then into your weakness, sense of your weakness, your defect.
So that's here the sense of I could become that person. That's something I feel I really don't want to be. And I also have a sense I could become. Just kind of get into that space. Of potential weakness, so to speak. And then look how you can take that position as you get up to move into the next space.
So when you're ready in your own time. And now moving into your shadow. Shadow.
And it's that sense of, that's the other side, the second mask. This is who I am, and I don't want to be. And I have a sense this is who I am too. So that second theater mask that you're hiding, just be in the presence of that. And when you have a good sense of that position, you can release it, and you can take on that position to hold that space. And you can come out whenever you feel ready to release that.
Very good. And so now, Alex, what I'd like to invite you to do is to take a look at your matrix, and then to have a walk through your matrix. And as you walk through your matrix, take a look at all of the symbols.
Just kind of visit your own sorted spaces. Oh, this is me. Always was, always will be my core sense of self. And if you feel that you need to make any adjustments when you look from that perspective, you can feel free to do that too. Yeah.
So if you're happy with that, you don't need to make any adjustments, then we can move forward into your potential. You ready?
And you can move to the next space. Yeah, and you can, shake it off whenever and then just kind of go back into the position, just make adjustment. And then you can go into the space of limitation. This is who I would like to be, but I think I'm limited. I can't.
This is who I want to be.
This is your limitation.
Your limitation. You would like to be, but you feel you can't.
You feel you'd like to change it.
Mm-hmm. And, yeah. If you want, you can also, take it on and check it out if that feels right in your body so that you can model it. You just know this is that sense.
Judy.
And Judy, you can just, see what adjustments come to that space. And it's,
Again, into your boundary.
this is not me. It's a clear boundary.
To your weakness and your defect.
This is who I could become. My potential and the weakness that I don't want to be. And then move it to the next space. This is who I am. What I perceive as my shadow. Okay.
Okay. What I'd like to do now is get the feedback from the members of your identity matrix to come in and find out what they experience. So if you'd like to come forward and you can speak to David, ask David what he experienced from this experience, this position, and so on. So David, you can give feedback on what you sensed.
This is actually a difficult position to hold. So it feels like there's a lot of expectation in this position, and it's a weight. So it feels actually quite like a real weight that's holding me down. And it's a position that's not particularly comfortable, and one that's almost a little bit of tension, aggressive tension in this. For me, that would be what I experience in it.
Thank you, David. To Julia, and this, of course, is your potential.
It was interesting that at first you started here, and I felt there was a climb as you got more and more into it, but you started with your head held high, and this sort of elevated your arms, and when it was here it was a sort of a wide openness, and when it was modified and you brought it around, it became an even harder position to hold, almost as if you were coming back down again. It was the natural sort of uplift, and then you wanted to modify it, the arms not quite so outstretched and hands turned over.
So your experience in that movement, in those positions,
Yeah,
your
there
experience.
was this definite sort of climb and lift, but when he adjusted it later, it was all about tilting the hands back inwards and not uplift. It was over and round, and it became even harder to hold that position.
And did you feel or get anything from those movements as
This was actually very, very strong, stepped in with a strong chin up, and then this could only go up. Really, there was always this uplift, but by changing that, it was much harder to keep your head up. It had a natural curving over to it, so it was a lot harder to keep up.
And then we come forward, thank you, Judy. Into limitation. Judy, your experience.
When I started, when you had it down here, it felt very hopeless. It felt sort of very hard. Well, actually too easy to stay there. Not a hard place to be, but easy to stay there. And when you lifted it up, it felt much better. And as I stay here, this bit which you did with the chin and the way I'm standing feels really centred, and this bit is getting hard to hold. So it felt wonderful to begin with, but staying here is difficult.
Again, if you could just, what did you sense from being in that position and holding it?
Kind of like not motivated, sort of sense of just go with it. But there was an uncomfortable feeling too, almost, sort of niggling in the shoulder really. Yeah, I'm kind of like lethargic and tired, but there's part of me that's saying, do something, but oh no, I can't, I gave into it.
Okay. And now into your weakness and defect. Luca, did you sense?
For really isolated, trapped. Very difficult to maintain. Slightly stressful at some level, just to maintain that. The knee happens to be my weakness, and I was on my knees, and my weakness is, so really think about my weakness, and it was really quite a, very tough psychological place to be at that. In there, you don't want to be in there for long, you want to get out of there.
And Alex, does this sort of resonate with stuff as well? Anything else at all?
Just alone.
Shadow. So Andrew, holding this position.
Very hard and difficult position to hold. Almost like I was testing myself, and in some ways pushing my limits. Almost like when you've got heavy shopping bags or weights, you can see how long you can hold them before you drop them. Almost like punishing as well, because it's such a almost like self-hatred, like trying to push push myself.
Self-hatred, you say?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Can I just ask you to stand here, just face the wall for me for a second?
Yeah, come back into the space.
No, absolutely, it's fine. Absolutely. It's good. What I'd like to do is everybody positions facing this way and in those positions that you were in before. So everybody facing this way. Okay, let's thank you very much. I'd just like to turn around and just look at your core, everyone in your core position. Okay.
Yeah, well, what I want you to sense is there any movement, how you get into, like if you alternate between the space getting into the core, accessing into the stance. Just kind of sense into if this is a sense of a core want to be centered place. What movement comes naturally to you to adjust it to a centered core? Any movements that come to you. Just very subtle, just very gentle. So that you keep that stance and add it into a way that's feeling, adding fluidity to it. And you just kind of observe if that fits for you. And just, feeling your feet and just kind of get a sense, what's the little movement, what's the little gesture, if I bring fluidity to it, if I bring centeredness to it, if I bring movement to it, what would be a natural movement that comes to me? Staying in that position, representing the same expression. And just to check in, if you give that a name, how would that feel for you?
I feel open.
Open?
Yeah, open. I feel purposeful. If I feel focused and determined and centered.
I was going to say centred.
Centered.
Good sense of balance, centred.
Open and ready, but comfortable at the same time.
Ready? Do those make any sense at all to you?
I felt open, but I felt at peace, at one with myself.
I feel quite vibrant, like quite energised,
Right.
like a very positive energy, kind of recharged almost.
Almost recharged. So, Alex, what I would like you to do is, and maybe you can take little curves or something, find your own way to kind of walk around in your museum and maybe check in and test what different versions and stanzas are shown to you. Are they,
Take on those things.
take on in a fluid way, you know, kind of like walking through and looking at it and taking it on and visiting the next one so that you
Mhm.
bring a little bit of those variation and see if they
Mhm.
fit. Don't swallow anything that doesn't fit, just take on whatever fits for you. You see, and whenever you feel, you can pause next to it, take the movement on, and then continue. And also add the words that you heard about opening and vibrant and peaceful. And how does that, what do you notice there?
I feel sense here. I guess if I was going to describe it, I'd describe it as nervousness. I remember I used to get at school. I used to go to school. Just get a sense of nerves.
You don't look nervous. You look more excited than nervous.
Yeah, but I
You
guess
know,
those
so-
things, I guess it's like when I do a presentation, I
Yeah.
feel nervous, but it's a good nerve.
Yes, it's that driving
Yeah.
kind of energy.
It's got, I kind of like the feeling.
Like that feeling.
It's a nice. It's not
Yeah.
when I say nervous, I don't mean it's like. Oh,
Yeah.
it's an energizing.
Energizing. Virginia Satir used to say, anxiety or fear plus breath is excitement.
Mm.
So there's just a slight distinction between those two
Mm.
that can make a big difference. You look a little bit more excited to me.
No.
Yeah, like that. Okay, so let's do one final step, and I would like to invite all of you to go back into the first positions and make adjustments that feel in your body appropriate to do, like bring a little bit movement to it. So go back into those positions that you were taking. And that, as a final step, what we would like you to do is just kind of circle around those different areas, those different fields, and visit them, and just kind of collect them and take them in, and then so that you take the core and move it into the potential. Just bring that into the meditation. And keep the fluidity with it, so you move into the next space. Kind of picking it up energetically for yourself. Kind of collecting it in. To move it to that space and just continue with movement. And then pick the last position and pick it up. And then you can come to the front and go like one more time, like almost like through your own aisle and bring it together into one gesture that brings all of the different pieces of the puzzle, all the different parts together in one gesture that
Go through it or
emerges for
just do
you.
one?
You just go through it and you guys just notice what happens for you, what naturally wants to come, and you can mirror the final gesture. So just walk through that aisle and collect it energetically all in and bring it to a final movement or gesture that brings it all together. And I want to invite you to mirror back that final gesture. Just trying to find a way to bring that to a close. See the representatives when you mirror it back. Who you became along the journey, bringing all those pieces together. And you can release it. If you want, you can make like a final check-in. You're good. Great. What was the sense?
I think the final sense for me was a sense of openness, a sense of possibility.
Sense of possibility.
My second animal was a Pegasus,
Um,
which was it was taking flight, but it was taking flight, so it wasn't flying yet. So,
Yes.
so it was pushing
Oh.
down, pushing up. And I think what was said was it was over time it's going to be hard, and from what that meant to me was it's hard to be successful, and it can be hard to maintain that success. But that doesn't mean that hardness or that difficulty is unpleasurable.
Which is true,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, for me that's what I love.
So that was a sense of openness.
Yeah, a sense of open, a sense of
Possibility.
possibility. Yeah. I think the openness is important to me because for what I want to do, bring a sense of an authentic self,
Yes.
and having people see who I am,
Yes.
and what I bring
Yeah,
to them
yes.
is important for me. So that's where my openness.
Is that a good place to end? Here? Is it okay to point out something to
Yeah,
you?
go for it.
Well, I wonder if you might have noticed the gestures, which are very balanced, which are very much balanced on both sides. You know, yeah, very congruent. You know, they come from your center and they're pointing outwards into like a one open. Does that feel right to you? So what you usually have, if you have a sense of balance, that is a place that tells you something about integration, about connection and integration. It's much different than when you stand like that. It's a stance of more two sides. That's the way you were speaking about it, that last sense, and bringing those things together. That was coming from a very balanced place. Just want to point that out.
Yeah,
Thanks for sharing,
Thank you.
and thanks for taking the courage
no, no.
to come through the journey.
Thank you both.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thanks. It's getting hot in here, isn't it? Yeah, it's like a high energy kind of thing, right?
Yeah, and we can all do it as well, step through it, our own matrices. If that's the case, should we go through the steps?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, okay guys, so the steps of this are, we're all sort of going to participate in the shapes. So, again, don't hold the shapes too long, you know, don't just hold them because you're standing there. Do free yourself up a bit, otherwise you get a bit stiff. But assume these 6 positions, and as we're going to do it a number of times, adopt different positions as well, different ones of these particular positions. And so the individuals to be coaching as well.
Mm-hmm.
So what we'd like you to do is for everybody to also act as a coach and guide your client through the steps of the matrix. So again, establish the core, potential, limitation, boundary, weakness, defect, shadow, and then invite your client to step into each of these positions and to think of a movement, if it's a movement, or indeed if it's not, if it's a fixed position, into a fixed position to encapsulate, to personify, to represent that feeling of that particular aspect of the identity matrix, yeah? So that they're adopting it, and when they've fully inhabited that and sensed that and connected to it, to then move forward, invite them to step into the next. And for that person who's representing the 6 people on the outside to step in and to move into that position and hold the position, again without doing yourself an injury. Invite them to step all the way through to really sort of sense each particular position that they move into, to really feel it, inhabit it, sense it, and connect with it. And then they come out the other side. Once they've been through it all, they then turn and look at their matrix, get a sense of their matrix and what it all looks like to them. And then when they step back through again, this time it's more straight into the individuals explaining how they sense
You
it.
get feedback.
So getting the feedback from each individual position. Yeah. So the person who has adopted the position in each one of these squares, so to speak, will then reveal what they sense, what they got from being in that position. Yeah? Giving feedback directly to the individual. Give the feedback to the individual rather than the coach. Direct the feedback to the individual. This is what I sensed being in that position. This is what I got. This is how I felt. Yeah. So walk through each of those positions, getting that feedback. Until again you come out the other side. You come back out again at the end. Having done that, then if everybody adopts the core position, so that when the client faces their matrix again, everybody is in the core, whatever the core position is. So everybody's representing that. Remembering, of course, just to go back a step, when you're walking through each section, you can make adjustments to the representation, to how the person is standing. Either because they're not standing quite how you stood, or as Alex did over here, you can actually make a complete change if it actually doesn't feel that that's right. Does that make sense? So feel free to be that flexible. So having then sensed your audio core, then the people in the core can make some adjustments to that position to free that up, to slightly alter the structure, if you like, the representation of that core position, for the person then to sense and to walk around and adopt the differences, the slight differences, and feel, and try those on to get a final sense here, to get a sense of their entire identity matrix, that journey that they've just been on, to sense that. And then they can walk through and have a move, their move, that represents the journey that they've just been on. Make sense?
It's like a final, combining gesture movement.
And see what their overall sort of sense of that journey is, as you describe this sense of openness. So, yeah, does that make sense?
What I suggest you do, because it is, you probably have noticed that in the room, it's a high energy exercise, so there's a lot of intensity to it. You can make adjustments in terms of intensity, how long you stay in a certain stance. So if you speed it up, if you have a pretty good clarity about this is what my core looks like, this is what my potential looks like, this is what my limitation looks like, if you can also speed it up so that maybe you have your body teach you and kind of direct you in those positions without thinking about it too much, so that you quickly move from one position to the next one, to the next one, to the next one. Because if you speed it up, the intensity of the energy doesn't increase that much. So there are variations to it to also soften it a little bit. So the representatives takes on the stance, so you can look around, you check out, you get feedback. What is it that I'm sensing here? And just checking in if that works for you, if that fits. Just in terms of resonance, otherwise you can make adjustments. And then the last step would be, we turn around, we see the core, and then you kind of walk through the middle, you walk through and pick it all up, collect it in, like all the pieces, so that they bring the final movement together, so that you have a sense of, I'm bringing it all together to myself, and then take that in.
Can I ask, the limitation, at first I thought it was what's limiting me, but then it's what is my limit?
Yeah, it's not an outside limitation, it's much more a sense, this is something I want to be, but I sense I can't, I'm not.
So it's beyond.
That's why I changed mine.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's where
that's
you did change yours. Exactly, because we want to be clear, this is something I would like, but I don't think it's possible for me. The boundary is something I'm clearly not, this is not me. So this is more a sense of clarity too, like, no, not me, that's my boundary. And I don't want to be, and I will never be. That's just a sense of certainty too. Here's a sense of certainty. The weakness is the second theater mask. Oh shit, this is somebody I could be, I'm trying to hide.
So am I right in saying that my interpretations of them with the boundary and the shadow in particular, and not necessarily negative things? A boundary might be, this is my boundary, and I'm quite comfortable with that.
Absolutely.
And shadow doesn't have to be something that, some people are frightened of the shadows or what's lurking in them, but other people are quite comfortable with what's that darker side.
Yeah, that's me too. I don't think it's necessarily pretty, but that's me too, and let's face it, we have those two sides. You know, it's that sense to make friends with that second side too. Yeah.
Embracing the shadow.
Absolutely, and embracing it, like, yeah, that's me too. And probably my friends know about it anyways.
Any other questions about the mechanics of it? We have a perfect number pretty much, 7 and 7. So if we kind of divide the room, we can have two matrices going at the same time. Ava will be on one side, I'll be on the other, and we will take part in each of the positions. So somebody is a coach and somebody is a guide from the group, guiding the person through it. Does that make sense? So, Nick.
Just to clarify, I mean, Alex just said now the reason he changed the limitations is more because of a discrepancy or a difference in the definition or how it's interpreted, right? But otherwise, there shouldn't be that big a change, should there?
Between?
Well, if the person going around the matrix needs to tweak or change something, I'm thinking that it wouldn't be that big of a change.
No, it's usually a slight difference.
Yeah.
It's like when you look from the outside, maybe there's something that you notice, like, well, a little bit different like that, yes.
Okay.
But I think it's also clarity. Is that really limitation, and are we speaking about the same space? So it was also about clarity here.
Okay, I wanted to
Yes.
check because obviously as the client goes through the matrix the first time round and they're in that space and feeling it, that's the more authentic one rather than actually seeing it and thinking, well, actually that's not quite right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah. Just to point this out again, the core is something you want to be and you are. So it's also a wanted place. So that to be clear about that, I am, I always was, I always will be. This is my sense of self and core, and I also want to be in that space. So it's a resource, and the potential is a resource in terms of where could I move to, and it kind of showed later in the next exercise.
Can you just run, I'm confused between potential and limitation. So can you
Yes.
just run through 1, 2, 3 on the top row, sort of showing the differences, please?
So the core is, this is me, clearly me, always was, always will be. This is my sense of core, me. Then this is, I have a sense who I could grow into. This is a sense who I could become. This is my potential. My limitation is, I would like to be that too, but I don't think it's possible. So it's a desire, but I don't think it's possible. You know.
It's a step sort of almost coming down from the peak.
Yes,
If that-
so it's like, yeah, a little bit like that. And then here that's a solid, nope, not me. And that's good to know. So that's a really solid boundary. That's clearly no, not me. And then if you go here, this is the shadow side of the potential, so to speak. So it's the flip side, because here you have the potential, and this is the flip side of the potential. This is, I could become, and I have a sense it's in me, there are the seeds in me, and I don't really like that. But there's a sense this is my potential shadow side, who I could grow into on the, on the
Yeah.
flip side of the potential. And when I go here, this is my clear sense of this is the flip side of the core. I am, and I know I am, and I don't necessarily like that. Well, let's face it, that's me too. And that's good to know.
Look across this top row, this line that was here. This is what you want to be, yeah. And I am, I could become, I'm not. And the bottom line is what you don't want to be, and again, it's what you are, what you could become, and what you're not. Yeah.
So in the way, you could look at those as two sides of a medallion, and they always represent those two sides. Yes. That's how I remind myself.